Hey, this is Zach with another episode of the Brand Power Analysis Podcast. And today I'd like to why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name's Greg Amiel. I'm a Canadian guy, and I'm with the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group up in Ottawa, Canada. So I work with the Ottawa Red Blacks of the Canadian Football League, otherwise known as the CFL, and one of Canada's most storied junior hockey franchises, the OHL's Ottawa 67s. So I get to do lots of fun things in the marketing and sponsorship sphere on a day-to-day basis, getting to work with a professional sports ownership group, making sure that fans and our teams stay connected all the time, and making sure that people here in Ottawa stay entertained as much as possible.
Yeah, I feel like fans don't. I feel like fans. It's just like any job. I feel like fans kind of go in and they don't see the inner workings of how hard it is to do all the inner workings of the players and the teams and stuff like that. So I definitely enjoy having you on, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day up there. What time is it over there right now?
It's noon for me, so it's lunchtime. But halfway through the day is usually a moment to take a breather, step back, have some conversations like this. Probably grab some lunch right after that, and then get back to a day's work here, as we've been trying to solve some unique situations during this pandemic to make sure that sponsors and our teams are still staying engaged with our fan base.
Yeah, it's definitely a different shift, I think, going on towards the end of the year. And I think one of the things that it's somewhat doing is it's kind of forcing. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's kind of getting people and businesses and athletes in general to kind of see, all right, maybe it's time that we start focusing our ad spend and our building our brand more digitally and not 100%. And not just that, events and stuff are starting to go a lot toward a lot of digital too, but there's a lot of still inner workings that are involved with the technology side as there is on building the events and selling the tickets and raising the money and things of that nature. So why don't you kind of tell me a little bit about you and your position and what you what does your day-to-day kind of look like?
Well, about a year ago, I've been with the same organization for well over 3 years now. I've spent lots of time in the marketing department, but about a year ago, I made a switch into the partnerships department. Some people refer to it as partnerships, as we do, but some also say sponsorship and activations. But what I do is I work very closely with a lot of our great partners that we have in order to come up with a variety of marketing and integration and activation campaigns to activate their brands amongst our team and our fans. So whether that's our telecommunications partner, our beer partner, our automotive partners, travel partners, whatever it may be, we have a long list of about 120 partners that work closely with us, who typically have access to stadium and an arena full of screaming fans to activate their brand in front of. But of course, this year during the pandemic, that's been a little bit different. Unfortunately, the CFL hasn't had a chance to play this year. They rolled the season over, and we'll pick back up again in 2021. But the Ontario Hockey League looks like it's going to start right now, where we're predicting in early February with a training camp in January. So it's very exciting because we'll hopefully be able to bring in a limited number of fans into the stadium, as well as our television broadcasts. So we saw some great successes, I would say, with leagues like the NBA and the NHL who conducted bubble-like operations, but we're slowly starting to see other organizations like that of Major League Baseball and NFL who are taking some forays into exploring what else could be outside of the bubble. And I think that's what we're going to start to see here in Canada shortly. So the past couple of months have been really focused on continuing to drive value for sponsors, and we've developed a program that we call the Our Nation Corporate Heroes, and Our Nation is the nickname that we give to the Ottawa Red Blacks fan base. So our Nation Corporate Heroes is a program that was developed for partners to to develop a great relationship with our fans and create some advocacy for the brands that are helping bring football back quicker. So this is generally focused around number one, some great digital integrations, as you were referring to before. So finding ways to engage our fans online. Secondly, finding ways to engage our fans in the community as well here more locally. And of course, give brand exposure to our sponsors across our site. And in the case of the Ottawa Red Blacks and 67s, our stadium is located in a great urban area with retail, commercial, and residential real estate. Therefore, it's still a very busy area where we can put up lots of advertising, hopefully start to do some more events in the near future. So that's really what I've been focused on the past several months, is trying to find the right solutions to make sure that our partners continue to feel and understand that we are driving value for them during the pandemic, even though we're not playing on the field.
So what are the, just for anyone who doesn't understand, what do for fans, that is, what are activations? Like, what is in terminology that sounds a little more simplified? How would you define an activation?
So an activation is typically a way where if you take both parties, so you have our team and then the sponsor, is finding a way to collaborate. You can call it a collaboration if you would, to get you as the fan, so the customer, eventual customer of ours and of course theirs, to experience their brand meshed with ours. So we've done a variety of things over the years to make sure that our fans feel like they're having fun at our games. And our stadium is called TD Place, so TD Bank has the naming rights to our stadium. And every year we do a variety of different things, where it could be an entrance, where at the entrance of our stadium we had the world's tallest foam finger that they could take a picture of with and standing in front of it, right? We've done other things with TELUS, our telecommunications partner, who is a major telecommunications company here in Canada, similar to Verizon or AT&T and those in the States, where we do lots of digital campaigns, photo booths, and other fun activities inside the stadium that our fans can explore their fandom, but also, thanks to that particular partner, realize that, if I'm a fan of this team and this partner supports the team and they made me have fun at this game, next time I'm thinking about making a purchase or making use of a particular service, I'm hoping to probably use that partner's product or service. So at the end of the day, it's a collaboration to get people engaging with a brand.
So in somewhat, from a professional player's perspective, they don't really see it because they don't really see the back. And I used to work for the Phoenix Suns back in the day, and I developed all the sponsorship material for it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of know the intermingles of how a lot of that works. But from a player perspective, I would think that when you think bigger, I mean, I know at the end of the day, the goal of any stadium is, we want to sell tickets. But I think that comes along with, bringing value to the fans and saying, hey, how do we have these experiences for them when they come? How do we win games? I think is, one of the biggest ones. So what would be something that, from a player's perspective, that you could somewhat acknowledge them on explaining how this benefits or how this works towards helping them as they evolve in their career?
Absolutely. And a lot of our activations, I just mentioned two there that really focus on the fan experience, but a lot of our activations come to life through the participation of our athletes. We have done a variety of different activations that include a player and their brand. Um, and oftentimes we explain to the athletes when we're working with them is that, whether it's in some sort of digital format or even an in-person format, this is an opportunity for you as an athlete to integrate yourself in the community and amongst the fans. Um, it's interesting, in CFL football, players, don't play too many years, and I think even the same in NFL football. I think the average, lifespan, not lifespan, but playing career of a player is approximately 2 years in the NFL and CFL,
Mm-hmm.
which means that, yeah, sure, there's we can name a ton, like guys like Tom Brady who've been in the game for 20 or some odd years, but the average guy will only spend 2 years. So if you have only 2 years to make the most of an opportunity, you want to integrate yourself in any opportunity that you can. And typically those opportunities are backed by partners because they cost a lot of money to operate. There's typically an opportunity in there for the athlete to be compensated as well. But beyond that piece, it's how you can be present and connecting with the fans that are either in attendance at the game or at an event in the community or out at a local restaurant or things like that. We do a variety of different things. So making sure that the athlete recognizes their involvement in this and how it can help a fan go buy their jersey at the end of the day, because they had such a great time getting to meet this player who made a wonderful impact on their day, on their month, on their year. I don't know, right? But those little experiences are what athletes should always work towards, because without the fans and without the brands, they're not playing. And I think this year we're seeing that more than ever. Um, you could look at leagues like the XFL that tried to get started, but without lots of fans and without lots of brands wanting to really help it go, the whole thing kind of struggled and now has been, sold to new ownership. And because of the pandemic, we're not playing because they're not selling tickets. But the players, once they understand that there is in fact lots of people supporting them, they can just give that little bit back. It'll go a very long way.
Yeah, I try to preach a lot. One of my biggest things I try to do when I talk to athletes is I try to say, hey, think about you playing a game as a professional game as more of a business and less so a career. Because one, the average is a couple of years, but the teams are paying you a lot of money, and the players don't necessarily see what. Yes, it has to do with their performance and how good they do on in the game, but I think a lot of that does come down to, hey, we're also paying for your appearance and your likeness on helping the team grow as an organization and as a team. And so the team already leverages the players' abilities, and they somewhat get free marketing. So like you said, it's like, hey, you want to go into the sponsorship, you get to do this, come here, you're helping the team out. You're helping bring yourself out to to the fans. Um, but that's somewhat free marketing. So I feel like when they come out of the game, they somewhat see it as, oh, I can do this all myself. It must be easy because I have this connection with this, and this. But at the end of the day, you had a whole backing of not just your teams on in the game, but you also had your coaches. You had the whole facility. I mean, everyone contributes in some way, form, or another to help that player grow and be on TV and help the team grow. So I definitely think that that's something that players could take away from this. I remember when I worked for the Suns, I think one of the hardest things for me was when we did all the branding and stuff for the partnerships was watching the games, and I'd look up and I'd see everything that we're printing or everything that we're making, and it would always be like, oh, I have to get that done by tomorrow, I have to get that done by the next day, I have to get that done by the next day.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for me to work in the arena, because it was like, it was always work, work, work. And that's one of the reasons I went out on my own with it, is because I'm like, I'd rather work on this on the side and then be able to still go enjoy the games. But but that's besides the point. So with where you're at in the business, why don't you talk a little bit more about your interactions with the sponsors, if possible, if you're allowed to. How do you usually go about working with these other brands, and how does that kind of work for the organization?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that we're very fortunate, and I think a lot of teams will say this too, is that we really do have some awesome relations, whether you're an athlete or whether you're in, even outside of the sports industry. Any relationship that you have, if it's really solid at its core, you're going to be able to gain the trust of the other party, in this case, the brands that we're working with, to be able to work on some really awesome stuff together. So I'd say that in and of itself is the most important thing, and athletes should look at it the same way as well. So in the day to day of everything that we're doing, is we're trying to advance and work through a pandemic right now. A lot of our brand sponsors that we work with have kind of come to us and said, okay, we're not typically doing the signage that we would have up in the stadium and so forth, and other activations that we would do on game days. What can we do? So right now, in working with them, like I said, we developed the Our Nation Corporate Heroes, where we basically created a bespoke experience for each partner. It's no longer talking about, hey, these are the available stadium assets that typically we can sell that are also television visible. And yes, usually there's one or two bespoke elements to certain partnerships. However, now it's completely realized that this year is about making sure they're okay with everything and that we're okay with everything, so that we can get ready for what we're hoping will be some sense of normalcy again in 2021 as we try to navigate this pandemic.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, without going too far into the pandemic, I'm really hoping that I think just the mindset of everyone and that nice cut from 2020 to 2021. My wife said the other day, she was like, nothing really changes from 2020 to 2021. It's just another day. And I'm like, I know, but I feel like people in general are going to have a mindset, like a start over, like, okay, let's get past that year. Let's move forward this year. And I'm hoping that mindset in itself for a majority of civilization will say, all right, at least in the States, will, or in the Americas will, kind of say, all right, let's start fresh. Let's see what we can do moving forward with the knowledge that we took from 2020 and how we can advance, more ideas, not just digitally, but, with those players. I'm seeing a lot of, the more I get into this, I'm seeing a lot of need for these players, and a need for a lot of these players to kind of go out there and how can I say it, really leverage their in-game experience and saying, hey, what do I want to do next? What's my passion? And you can talk a little bit more about this. I know we kind of brought it up in our last call when you've said you've talked to the players a little bit. When they want sponsors, when you're like,
Yeah.
oh, how do we sponsor? Like, how does that engagement usually work with you when you're talking to the players, and what kind of advice do you give them?
Well, yeah, I've been fortunate in my previous role. Like I said, I was in marketing, and I looked after all the community engagement for the sports teams that we operate. So I work very closely with the athletes, booking them for a variety of different opportunities, some for sponsors, some straight for brand marketing of our organization and being out and about in the public. But I was fortunate to be able to get to create some very personal relationship with these guys, and get to know them outside of everything they typically do in the public eye, which everybody just assumes is football or hockey. And yeah, of course, in their case, as is the case for the majority of athletes, they spend 10, 15 plus years of their lives solely focused on the sport. And while they attend college or university and maybe other types of education over the years, their main priority oftentimes is to become professional. So they skip out, or they miss out on really embracing the things they may be learning at university or in school, which are typically the fundamentals of whether it's marketing, communications, or business. And oftentimes I try to just spark conversation about, okay, you're looking for this sort of thing or that sort of thing. Well, then tell me a little bit about what you study in school, right? Sometimes you get a variety of answers. And by variety, I think you get what I'm saying is that they're not very in depth. And some will go about really telling you about what they felt passionate about in school, the classes they really enjoyed taking, the things they learned in those classes and opportunities, and the things that they also didn't like, which is very important in my opinion as well, because it's as you plan for what's next in your career, you need to know what you don't like. And I really try to get the athletes to reflect on some of these fundamental elements, and that's recognizing that their brand is important to them. They own that. That belongs to them and nobody else but them. But what could they be doing to make it of value to sponsors? And I think that's really the most important thing. And then I explained to them, I said, look at our team, for example. Our team as a whole is of value to sponsors because, one, we win. Two, we have thousands of followers and fans that come to every single game and want to attend. They're attentive and they listen, right? If the Red Blacks are hosting a great upcoming event and we invite them there, they will come. So to sponsors, that's very exciting because they could work with our team to gain the trust of these fans to be potential customers because they recognize that there's an affinity and an affiliation between two brands. So I explain to the players that if you can create value and create trust and a relationship with potential sponsors, those opportunities will come. But what is it that you're doing that is of value? Sometimes athletes say, well, I have 50,000 Instagram followers. That's fantastic. That's a great start theoretically. But are they really engaged with you, right? Did you do something one time that went viral 3 years ago? You got a ton of followers, but since nobody really cares and everybody kind of forgot to unfollow or whatever it be. So demonstrating what type of engagement you do. Do you do engaging things on the internet that people find interesting? And by engaging, I don't mean go do something stupid that will get attention and go viral. You are doing something that people find interesting, that they feel that they could engage with, they could learn from, or feel a part of. Creating a community or an opportunity to connect with fans is really important. So again, that's really what I get them thinking of is where do they create value for themselves and the sponsors? And what did they learn once upon a time in school or in other opportunities that could bring value, again, to those sponsors?
And I think a good example of that is JJ Watt. I mean, what he did a couple of years ago.
Oh my God, yeah.
For the Hurricane. I mean, and just watching recent news on how he was such a big influence on the coach switching and stuff like that. Like when you're still playing the game, I think that teams value. And I mean, even when I watch, football, soccer, I don't watch too much hockey, but I've been to a few games. When I watch these, mm-hmm. I always tend to. The player doesn't have to be the best player on the field. Like a lot of times that's only one part of what makes a successful player. It comes down to their morale, the way they act. I mean, I'm a huge Atlanta Falcons fan, for instance. But I don't mm-hmm. hate the Saints as a rival. I mean, because I think Drew Brees is a down to earth guy. He's really honest with the stuff that he talks about. And so and even the Texans with JJ Watt is an example. Like you look at these certain players and you become fans of these players which helped you become fans of the team. So I think that what you're saying is true. And I think my biggest downfall when I'm trying to talk to players is I'm very technical, from the brand identity side and the marketing
Yes.
side. I feel like I get very technical with what I say to these athletes, but it does come down at the end of the day. A lot of times it's the small attention to detail things that brands look at in the long term longevity. So coming up with like a brand voice, like you said, and saying, hey,
Mhm.
how are we going to reach this? And not just reaching out and blindly throwing stuff up, but really thinking about what you're saying and who you're trying to reach as a fan, and how you're going to bring value to those fans. That's really going to keep you bringing in an audience. Yeah, like you said, I've had players come to me and be like, "Oh, I have 50,000 following, but I'm not really making any money off of it." I'm like, "Well, what are you trying to do with this following? I mean, is it
Mhm.
just sitting there?" And they don't realize that normal brands, unless you're a very, very big corporation, they don't have 50,000 following. So they look at 50,000 like it's nothing. And in my mind, I'm like, it's still a lot. It's still a lot
Yeah.
of people that you're talking to, and so being able to reach your fans, and that not doesn't just help the team, but it can also help your future endeavors as you decide, hey, I want to open a nonprofit, or maybe you want to open a gym, or like you said, find the things that you're passionate about and have an idea and transition that same passion over, and leverage the small things like I always say a logo isn't just a logo; it's part of the brand. So why don't we dive
Yeah.
in a little bit about what your thoughts are on a brand? I mean, I think that the word brand gets used so much that I think that a lot of it's misinterpreted a little too much. So let's dive in a little bit more into what your kind of thoughts are on a brand. What do you really think a brand is, and what do you think that um, how that helps? How would that help not just athletes but any individual or corporation um, grow?
Well, I think to your point too, I would say I'll go right ahead and argue that a brand isn't just a logo
Mhm.
either. The opposite direction, right? And I think more and more so as people have increased access to, I call it globalization of we in North America can hear or see brands in Australia or in parts of Asia or whatever way quicker than we ever used to, right? And in the opposite as well, right? Those on other sides of the world can hear or see about brands way quicker because of internet and so forth. But with all that stuff aside, I do think that brands, more importantly, are beyond just the image of the logo. It's actually what they stand for. Um, and consumers are smart today, for the most part, I'd like to think. And they're much more conscious about what the brands that they choose to purchase from or services that they make use of stand for. And that, in my opinion, can go in a variety of ways. But I think brand statements are rooted in things like integrity or innovation or excitement, right? What are those emotions and sentiments that these brands make you feel as a consumer? And an athlete should look to reflect the same. Um, in a sense, you could look at. I'm trying to think of, the bad boy Dennis Rodman that once was. It was different. Not everybody agreed with his approach and his philosophy. However, there was something incredibly captivating about someone who was kind of breaking the rules or reaching for some sort of freedom that other players never really looked to reach for. And that may have inspired other people to do something similar in their lives. It's not wreak havoc and do some of the crazy things, but maybe reach for that freedom that they were looking to in a job or in their careers, right? Um, and there's countless examples of athletes who do this sort of thing, but they create a brand around themselves, and you can look at one of the guys on the court with him, Michael Jordan, inspired every young kid to want to be able to reach for the rim and dunk a ball, right? By not just because of his logo, but because of who he came to be, how he chose to speak in front of people, how he chose to recognize his failures as the elements that allowed him to reach his successes. So that is what I think a brand is really deeply rooted in, is the sentiments that go beyond just the visual logo, like you've said, right? The logo is part of the brand, but I don't think it is the brand all the time, right? It has to be a part of it, but it doesn't stop there. It goes way deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I actually put a video up on YouTube about the Jumpman logo, and I kind of talked about that a little bit and how it transitioned and became a part. How Michael Jordan became a part of that. So anyone wants to check that out, they can check it out on the channel. But I think that I'm going to have you do a little exercise, not right now, but on your free time, because I think it will help you kind of dive into brands a little bit more. Like, brand strategy in itself is one of those things that when we develop our brand identity systems that we kind of take a look at. So we do, like you said earlier, are you integrity? Are you what kind of values does your company kind of look at to bring in customers or fans, or what is your voice? And so it's not just about the logo, but it also is about your color schemes and your fonts and stuff like that, because a lot of that stuff really does dive into your values. I mean, I think that a lot of that's one of the biggest mistakes. And when I got into this right now, they do think it's just a logo. So they kind of look at it and they go, oh, I'm just going to have some designer out there kind of create me a logo, and I'm good to go. And then you look at it and you're like, what does that have to do? How does that represent you in any way, form, or another?
Yep.
Like, and you're using bright color, these certain color schemes and these fonts that make it look like you're it just brings this feel. I always tell people you have to think about the logo as part of the brand, and it has to be so simplistic that it's subconscious and it's iconic. So I like to use examples like Circle K. I don't know if you have Circle K's up there in Canada, but I like to use Circle K as a good example because it is a very simple logo. But when people are driving down the street, and for athletes that are watching this, you're driving down the street, you can kind of say, where am I getting gas today? And even though, the Circle K is a mile down the road around the four corners that all have gas stations, you take that extra mile and you go to Circle K because you subconsciously remember their values and the honesty that they bring you as you buy their products. And so you go there. So I 100% agree with you on that. So when I was saying go back and as you're kind of, as you're growing and you're kind of looking at stuff from a day-to-day, just challenge yourself a little bit and take a look at certain brands and kind of say, as you're talking to them and you're working with them and their values and what they're doing, kind of digest their colors and their fonts and the stuff that they're working with, even with the designers that you're probably working with to help create some of these in market advertising for that company, and that's where of course brand style guides come in and all that nifty stuff, but we won't go that far into it. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's always more than a logo. And so, and I think JJ Watt really showed that a lot with his campaign and how everyone, when they look at him, yes, his logo and what he does, I mean, I know what it looks like because I'm a geek when it comes to that stuff, but
I'm familiar with it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you think about that, but now it's somewhat tied to him, and you still overall think of JJ Watt, but when you see the logo, you think of JJ Watt. You know what I mean? So I think that that's something that people can take away from it, that when they see that, they feel the humbleness that he has, and they feel the givingness that he has. And I think that that's what it really, really symbolizes more than anything. So, I know that we talked a little bit about you working with athletes and kind of telling them some of those struggles, but have you worked with or from your experience as you've grown with these brands, athletes that have maybe not, or we'll just say successfully, but have open businesses or have worked in any sort of capacity outside the game?
Yeah, right now is a perfect example. Um, a lot of people do not recognize, for the most part, that although they are tremendous athletes, though the players that are in the CFL, there's a handful of them that are capable of not playing this year and having made enough salary uh, to hang on for a year and return to play next year. But this year, I've had a variety of conversations with some of our players who've had to look for another source of income and have had to diversify a little bit. And they are still going early in the morning to train and stay physically fit. However, they're going to a job every single day throughout this year to start developing their future. And some are much more ahead of others because some have recognized that even while they were playing, during the off season, they would be busy getting real estate licenses or, taking courses to eventually become a financial advisor or whatever it is of interest to them. And typically, that's deeply rooted in what they studied at school as well, or perhaps what family experiences they may have had, businesses that they're around. But right now, there are some who got a bit more of a head start and were able to find jobs immediately because they've already, I don't, well, I guess you can call it interned in the off season with commercial real estate ordering. So they're not necessarily owning and operating their own business just yet, but I'm really proud to see that some have taken the necessary steps themselves just yet because they recognize they do have some time left in their sports career, but will come out of their sports career with something to talk about on their resume, such as the great leadership and sportsmanship and everything, teamwork that comes out of playing team sports, but actually having the true raw experience that is maybe looking for, well, which is really impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think one thing that not even from an athlete perspective, but I mean, you hear a lot of I'll just call them gurus out there that will say, "Hey, you don't need to go to college." And I know you brought this up a little
Mm-hmm.
bit when college, and we could dive into that a little bit later on. But uh, I've tended to see, I tend to say, hey, you know what? I think college is great. I think college, a lot of people don't understand. It's very similar to going out there and getting an internship and starting a job. I learned so much more outside of school than I did in school, yes. But I think college helps you teach
Absolutely.
yourself. I think that that's the point of college. It's you're having a teacher give you things to do to teach yourself. When you're out in the corporate world, um, working for another company or even when running your own business, you do have to teach yourself things on a constant basis and ever growing and ever changing, especially with what's going on right now. So I think that's a good example of why college really helps. And I give all of your athletes kudos for taking that leap. And I mean, I think it goes back to what you said it puts I'm not going to say a negative spin on it, but it's the first time that I really thought about, college. I know college at the NCAA has been talking a lot about, we're in the process of them starting to allow the students the players to do sponsorships. And so it's really making me start to see it from another aspect of if, maybe that's going to delay their opportunities in finishing, like you said, they get so tangled up in training and trying to make it to the team, the professional level that they neglect some of their schoolwork. So, what is your thoughts on that?
I think we need an entire other podcast to discuss the whole NCAA aspect, but
Yeah, it would take a
you
whole
know,
podcast.
the overarching idea, I'm of a very similar train of thought as you, is that Um, Education is a very powerful tool, and it's a fundamental system. Yes, I totally do agree that you can go out there and you can learn a ton on your own without going to school. There's plenty of great people who have done that, very successful people who have done so. But I do feel, especially how deeply rooted becoming a professional athlete is in the United States for most sports, the path is through school, especially in my case where I work with some football players. You do not become a professional unless you are recruited out of a school.
Yeah.
So you do have to attend a university. And the opportunity that you are given is often not fully reflected. And I think that's what surprises me the most, is that um, to be able to attend some of these schools as a regular person outside of sports, I mean, the cost is immense, the reputation is immense as well. And some of these guys are being given a free ride, but they don't care about anything other than making it pro. But like I said earlier, the average, career is only 2 years. You could spend 4 years in college. That's more time than you will have gone and played pro. Why not make the most of that opportunity? And then when you finish, park it and go play your pro career, because I truly believe these athletes deserve that. They've worked hard for it. But make sure that you take something from there that will allow you to have a future. And in some cases, yeah, you have the Tom Brady's of the world who, even when he retires, will truthfully never have to, I do air quotes with my fingers, work another day in his life. He probably would be set, but he's probably of the mentality that he'll want to continue to work. And he's set himself up with a tremendous brand. And now they're growing into the health and wellness space and nutritional space and a variety of other things. They're diversifying. And that to me is something that comes not just with, you know, I'm really great at my sport, but also taking a moment to step back and be really good at other things and understanding how businesses operate. How do you do marketing? How do you partner with people? Who should I partner with to achieve this? Who should I invest in certain things with? And you have to be educated to make the right decisions most of the time. Of course, there's unique opportunities that will come about, and things may happen that great things work for people. But for the most part, you want to have a concrete foundation of what you're doing moving forward. So the schooling aspect, I think, is greatly important, because it does teach you a lot about life. And it also teaches you, like you said, on how do I teach myself this? If you come out of school, you've practiced for 4 years on how to teach yourself things. But if you don't take advantage of that and you're done your career, then you start having to teach yourself. Not only are you going to be 4 years plus, let's say you played 6 years in football, that's 10 years behind teaching yourself things, compared to everybody else who's gotten now 10 years of teaching themselves some stuff. So that's just my perspective on it. Others may feel differently, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a benefit.
Yeah, especially if you have a scholarship. I think that if you have a scholarship, it's one of those things like we just paid off my student loans. So after 10 years,
Going to school for sure.
it's one of those situations where I look at it and I'm saying, if you have a sponsorship, take advantage of that sponsorship. A scholarship. If you have a scholarship, take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I want to thank you for being on. We could probably talk all day, so I'll cut to the end of it.
Sure thing.
Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you, who you'd like to possibly, if anyone, reach out to you if they like to, and maybe we'll have you on the podcasts on a more frequent basis. I think you have a good insight on the inner workings, and I'd love to jump on your brain a little bit more about some of these other topics.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me. I love to connect on LinkedIn. I think it's a wonderful tool. simply www.gregamiel.ca will redirect you to my LinkedIn. So that makes it pretty simple and straightforward. But I encourage you, if you want to connect with me, send me a message. Let me know you listen to the podcast or something you found interesting. I think it makes a great starting off point for a great conversation. That's how Zach and I got connected with one another. And I think it really creates an opportunity for us to get a good discussion going. So if you're in the world of marketing, sponsorships, athlete management, whatever it may be, if there's an interest to connect, please do so. And I encourage you guys to do the same with Zach as well, because he's got some great insight I've been learning from him in the conversations we've been having. So I look forward to being on again if we can make it happen. And in the time being, I'll say goodbye.
Well, thank you. And this will be another episode. This is another episode of the Brand Power Analysis Podcast. And again, I want to thank you for being on, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.